can you all see the code to get in?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Good. I'm going to give everybody like a minute or two to get to join this classroom, because there's a couple things that we're going to do. This is going to be sort of interactive. It doesn't mean you guys have to talk. I'll be the one talking most of the time, but there are a couple forms that I'm going to ask you guys to fill out while we're doing this session. So I'll give everybody a minute to do that, and then we'll get started. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and open another tab with Google Classroom at the top and join the class with this code, please. Oops, sorry. I'm going to put the class code in the chat for now, just so. Ms. Clark already put it in there for me. Thank you. All right. My presentation today is about how to gather and analyze data using Google Forms. Google Forms is the best tool that I've found for gathering and analyzing data with your students. Some of you may already be familiar with Google Forms, and that's great. If you are not, this will be a very informative course for you, or maybe you find yourself somewhere in the middle where you know how to use them, but maybe you haven't realized the full potential of Google Forms. So I'm going to go through all of them, and the objectives for this course today are these three things. By the time this is over, I hope that you're able to use Google Forms for data collection, which is something I call survey mode, but I'll come back to that in a second. I use Google Forms a lot for formative assessment, especially if I'm given a multiple choice assessment just at the end of the day or maybe at the end of a week. I love using Google Forms for this, and I'll come back to why in a few minutes. Also, Google Forms makes it very easy to transfer the data and grades and scores to Google Sheets for easy reference for you to print out and find patterns and things. Like I said, patterns in your students' grades to see what maybe you need to reteach or what they're doing well. I use Google Forms because it's paper-free. I do not have to grade multiple choice quizzes by hand anymore. And like I said before, it easily converts data to spreadsheet for tracking patterns and inconsistencies with your students. So the first form of Google Forms I want to talk about is when it's in survey mode. This is an ungraded survey that just allows you to collect certain types of data that you might need throughout the school year. Some examples of those are student learning style inventories. I can use this to figure out, is my class mostly visual learners? Are they kinesthetic learners? Things like that. Student interest inventories. What are my kids like? What am I going to talk to them about? We're going to do one of these in just a second so I can show you how I use that. Parent information. Right now especially, we need a lot of information from parents. We need to know what parents are thinking. We need to know what resources they have at home. This Google Forms is an easy way for them to fill this out, and you have all this data right in front of you. Student transportation information. Most years, I know this year is a little weird, but most years I send a Google form out to my parents to ask them, are they bus riders? What bus do they ride? Are they car riders? Things like that. All that transportation information that you need at the beginning of the year, a lot of times I can knock that out right off the bat. I will say this before we get to making one. I'm going to say this several times. Always, always click collect email addresses when you start one of these. So we will, I'll come back to that throughout this presentation. But for now, what I'd like for you guys to do is go back to the classroom that you just entered and go down to the bottom of the stream and click on this interest inventory where it says interest inventory 2020. And I'd like for you guys to quickly take this form for me. There is just a few questions. It won't take you very long, but I'm going to show you how I use this to gather information about my students. This is kind of a sample of interest inventory that I might give my students at the beginning of the year. And I want to piggyback off something that if you were in our last session, Dana Garrett said a couple times that anytime she introduces something new, especially something that she's going to take a grade on, the first time you do it, you want to try to make it fun. And that's why I do a lot of these interest inventories, student learning, like learning style inventories at the beginning, so that when we get to the point in the year where I'm using Google Forms for formative assessment and it's graded, that my students aren't using their brain power to try to figure out the format of the quiz. They already know that stuff. They've been through, we've taken a couple Google Forms when there was, when it was a low pressure situation. So they're not stressing about the format of the assessment. They're just taking it. So I see some of the responses people are starting to submit. So once you get done with once you submit the form, go ahead and hop back on to the Google Meet where I'm presenting so that you can see what I see as the teacher if you haven't, if you're not familiar with this yet. So I'm going to show you the different ways that I can use this data once these interest inventories are submitted to help connect with my students. So I'm going to give everybody a few minutes. Let's see, how many people do we have? Okay. Looks like we've already got 7 responses. So if some of you are still working on it, that's okay. If you're not, just jump on back on here and we'll jump back on the Meet and I'll show you what I'm going to do with this information. So I've got 7 responses in here. Let's just pretend for a second that I've got a classroom with only 7 kids. Gosh, how much could you get done with that? But anyway, here I have who all responded to my form already. So as you can see, as I go down here, the first thing that it says is summary. This is more like whole class data. Okay, so as I come down, I see, all right, here's 9 responses now. And the data is updating as more responses come in, which is nice. But see, when I click on responses at the top, I can scroll down through here and look and see, all right, the first one, what's your favorite color? So I guess red is kind of the majority of the favorite color in the room. What's your favorite style of music? Looks like country is leading that one. So I'll know if we have some background music one day, I might try some country some days. When you watch TV, what do you most like to watch? Looks pretty even between home improvement shows and talk shows there. You see, I'm learning a lot about my class as a whole right now because I'm looking down through these responses. All right. Nonfiction seems to be leading the favorite book genre. And it will provide me graphs of all of that data right here in Forms. Now, what I can also do is go over here and see question by question. What were the responses? But then let's say this is something that I want to keep because let's see, we go individual here. Let's say, and Ms. Ford, since I haven't seen you for a while, I'm going to pick on you for a second. Let's say that Jennifer Ford and I are having a really hard time getting along as a teacher-student relationship. She's just very disruptive in my class. So what I'm going to do, from time to time, and look through to see what it is that she's interested in and how can I start to build a relationship with her. Okay, see these, now I know shopping, she loves shopping. So that's something I might try to talk to her about next time we're out at recess or wellness. You know, her favorite subject is math. I may want to encourage her with that. See, I've got all this data on each individual student, not just my class as a whole. So I love to use it in this way to get to know my students on a personal level. I'm going to go back to the presentation for a second, because one thing that's easy to do is that once you get all this, you want to put it in a sheet, because you can easily print all of this information out and put it in a folder for easy reference. It's very simple to do. You just go where I was at, where it said responses, and there's a little green button that will pop up. The little sheets icon will be right over here to the side. So all you do, create spreadsheet, hit create, and then it is going to put all of this information that I've collected now into this nice handy little spreadsheet that I could then print out, like I said, put it in a folder for easy reference. So I have all of the information that my students just gave me right here in a spreadsheet. But I also have it in this form too, if you'd rather look at it like this, back on in the Google Forms. It keeps all this information for you after you build one of these. So that's as far as the survey goes, that it's a very easy way to get a lot of good information about your students, or a lot of good information from your parents in one place for easy reference. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to go to the next part of why I use Google Forms. I guess I'll stop right there for just a second. Does anyone have any questions so far? Let's see. Okay, Macy, I see it says you're trying to get access to it. I apologize. I'm not sure why you wouldn't have access to it. Let's see. I'll try to fix that in a little while. Okay. We're going to move on for just a second, though, because I want to talk about how, when I start using this for formative assessment, and how it can go ahead and grade it for me, which is why I almost never, ever give a multiple choice quiz on paper anymore, because I have to grade it if I do it that way. This automatically grades it for me. It just takes a little bit of setup beforehand. But when you start to make a form, and I'll show you how to do this in just a second, you just want to make sure that you click on make it a quiz, because once you make it a quiz, then you can assign each question a point value. Normally I just make it 1. I'll have like 10 questions. So it's, each question's worth 1 point. I'll show you here in a second the different types of questions that you can ask on here. Usually if it's a formative assessment, I limit it to multiple choice, but you don't have to. And I'll come back to that in a second. But the way to do it, I'm going to just kind of do this by myself so that you can see how this goes. I always start creating a form in My Drive, okay? Because I go to My Drive, I go to New, normally have to come down here to More, open up a new one. Then, of course, you give it a title. And here we go. The one thing that I wanted to show you is when you open a new form, it automatically defaults to the survey mode. So what you want to do is come up here, go to your settings, this little sprocket, hit quizzes, and then you have to hit make this a quiz. Now you have other options to see what options to make it a quiz. Because what you can do in quiz mode is once you create a question, you can come down here to the answer key and assign it a point value. Okay, and you want to make sure, and definitely you want to make sure that it's required. And so once you type in a question, you will then see, you can assign it a point value and make it required. What I'm going to do now is I want you guys to go back to the Summit Google Classroom and just take the quick sample quiz. It's the second thing down in the stream so that I can show you what it looks like from the student's point of view. Because it will, once you take this quiz, it will tell you your score when you get done. And then I'll show you how I use that to analyze my students' data as far as their grades. So go ahead and take that sample quiz for me, if you don't mind. And of course, when you get done with the sample quiz, once you submit, come on back to the Google Meet so that I can show you what I'm seeing. Okay, Heather, I just read your question. Her question was, for those of you still working on the quiz, it says, have ever assigned quiz using the quiz option in Google Classroom? I actually have not, Heather, because I've always found it's just as quick to give an assignment and then just add the Google form to the assignment. I hope that answers your question. I have not really played around with the quiz option yet. I like to make my form first and then assign it as an assignment later, because it seems that's just always worked for me. So, yeah, there's a reason for that, Jen. All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. So it looks like my class averaged 3 out of 4 points so far. That's 7 responses. Won't call anyone out, but so you can go question by question to see which ones. Again, this is not really looking at any in particular, but you can go question by question to see which one. They're both books. Good. The Island of Dr. Moreau. Good answer there. I'll come back to see that one. But see here, you can also kind of do the same thing that I was doing. If I can look at, as a class, how did we do? We did 3 out of 4 on average, so pretty well. But then I can go look at different individuals. So let's see, let's pick on Jennifer again. And see, all right, Jennifer. So she's got her math down. She's got blue. See how that was a short answer question? You got to be real careful in typing your answer there. I'll come back to that in a sec. She knows her science. I guess I'm going to have to reteach this lesson about college basketball to Jennifer. And then she doesn't know. So we're going to have to go over themes again. But see how I can use this data to look at individual students as well as the whole class. And again, as you saw while you were taking the quiz, that there are several different ways, several different types of questions that you can ask. So when you start, what color, let's say, what color is the sky? That's my first question. Now I can write a multiple choice question over here. All you have to do is click on this drop down menu over here. I can make it multiple choice. I can make it check boxes where there's more than one answer. And I've found as a science teacher in 4th grade for the past couple of years that I use those check boxes because there are what's called multiple selection questions on K-Prep. So that's something you might want to get your students used to, is having to select multiple answers. You can have a short answer, or we call paragraph. And I don't normally use short answer or paragraph because you got to go back, and a lot of times I will have the kids just write those on paper if I want to add an ERQ or a short answer to my assessment. But that may not be a bad idea to get them used to typing their answers in, because if I understand correctly, we may be going to online K-Prep here in the near future. So kids are going to have to type their answers. They're going to have to type answers to short answer and extended response questions. So that might be something that you guys want to use. I will probably start using that a little bit more this year to get my kids ready for K-Prep. But at this point, does anybody have any questions about how Google Forms are used, or any other ways, or does anybody want to share how you use it? If you feel like there's something I missed, feel free to jump in and tell me. Okay. With regard to answers, I always had trouble with the way that students answer, for example, capitulations, spelling their answers. Yes, and that I believe that is a way, there's a way to put multiple correct answers on there. I'm not sure I've done it because, like I said, I haven't used the short answer and paragraph that much, but it is something to consider. And I'll honestly, you're going to have some time to play around with that. That's what I thought. Thank you, Ms. Clark. That's what I thought. I'm going to stop presenting for a second and just talk. Yes, I think that there is I thought there was a way to do it because, and like Ms. Clark says, there's so many possibilities to do it, but it is what it is. And you always, even a lot of times when students are writing, you're going to have to go back and read it anyway. Anytime, another option there is to not assign a point value to it and just grade it later yourself. That's one way to do it. That way it doesn't mess up the student's grade for the other ones. These are good questions. Anybody have anything else they want to add?
Matt, I'll just say that with that multiple answers, I thought I taught a math class for NTI this past spring, and I was like thinking, oh, math, the answer's a number. Surely we can use this short answer feature. But it just happened to be that we were on a measurement unit. And so like one of the answers was 25 centimeters. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that there were so many ways in the world for fifth graders to write the word centimeter. Yeah. Or abbreviate centimeters. So I had a lot of students that were very frustrated because I left it where it did score it automatically with, I put like 10 possibilities in, but it's still, I had a few kids who typed it a different way or misspelled the word. And so I learned real quick, it's better just to not, like you said, not give it a point value and go back and assign that later.
Yeah, I'll say this, Google Forms is most effective when you're working with, most efficient, I should say, when working with multiple choice questions or those check boxes, or what I call multiple selection questions. If your short answer is a one-word answer, then you can normally narrow it down pretty well. But again, you can't help a student misspelling it either, even if they have the right answer. So I generally, when I do this, I will give my short answers or ERQs on paper after the kids finish the multiple choice questions on the Chromebook, if that makes sense, because I'm going to have to go back and read them anyway. Yes, thank you, Sherry. That's a good point. When you start a form, there is an option in the settings for the kids to see their answers. You always want to make sure that you click that because it gives the kids instant feedback on what they got correct and what they can improve on. So that's a great point, Sherry. Thank you. As far as my presentation, that is about it. That is a quick overview for anybody who has not seen Google Forms before. So if you haven't done it before, you're not very familiar with it, I would encourage you to open up your drive and open a new form and make a couple samples to see what it is it's capable of. And I'll be on here until 11:30 at least. If you have any questions, if you want to try to make one and ask questions, I'll be right here. So you guys, thank you all for listening. And if you have any more questions, like I said, I'll be here till 11:30.
Awesome job, Mr. Murray. Thank you so much for helping us out with some Google Forms. Like I said, that is super important, especially if we end up NTI or anybody working for Online Learning Academy. Great stuff. Yes. So I'm going to put the link back in here so that for the sign in. Again, it's super important that you sign in even for the 10:30 session, because each session counts as PD time. And Mr. Murray will be hanging out here for another 30 minutes. I encourage you to play with the Google form. And then if you have a question, he'll be here to answer it. So give it a try.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.